Am I the asshole for making my son walk the dog? Throwaway account and fake names because my wife is also on Reddit. And sorry for the long post. My wife, 39 female, and I, 42 male, have 3 sons. Alex, 15, Dylan, 11, and Jake, 8. When I was a kid, I always wanted a dog, but my parents said no. I never got the chance to get one during my 20s. But recently my interest in owning one was sparked again, so I asked my family what they thought about getting a dog. My wife wasn't enthusiastic about it, but she relented after a few weeks of me asking. Alex and Jake were excited to get one, but Dylan was immediately opposed to the idea. Dylan was always different than my other sons. He never had an interest in sports and was always more subdued than his brothers, which always had made it hard for me to connect with him. He remained opposed to the idea about getting a dog, but me and my other sons managed to wear him down until he finally relented. However, he said that if we did get a dog, he wasn't going to be interacting with it or taking care of it. It would be completely on me and his brothers. I found this ridiculous, but I agreed in the moment, hoping he would change his mind after meeting the dog. The problem is he hasn't changed his mind yet. We've had Zeus for 7 months now, and Dylan has not warmed up to him in the slightest. He doesn't play with the dog. He doesn't cuddle with him. He doesn't let Zeus into his room because he destroys stuff, and whenever he is near the dog, he just ignores him. I find this completely ridiculous. Zeus loves Dylan. He follows him around whenever he sees him and jumps on him to get his attention and play, but Dylan just isn't receptive to it. To change this, I told Dylan last week that he would be in charge of walking the dog every day after school. Dylan straight up refused and has shut down the conversation every time I bring it up. It's been a week and he hasn't walked the dog once. In my frustration, I told him that if he didn't start listening, then I wouldn't allow him to go to the comic book store anymore, and he freaked and told my wife. Now my wife is upset with me, claiming that I knew what I was getting into with this, and I knew that Dylan wouldn't be playing with the dog, but his intolerance of the dog is weird, and I refuse to entertain it any longer. My wife has been short with me ever since that conversation, and Dylan is cold with me as well. Alex is now agreeing with his mother, which is making me have second thoughts. So, Reddit, am I the asshole? So I think we actually have to look at this a couple of different ways. Number one, Dylan straight up made abundantly clear in his lengthy disclaimer how he felt about the situation. And I think we also have to recognize that right now, some people just aren't dog people. Some people can't connect or don't want to connect with animals in that way. And there are some conditions that actually prevent people from being able to connect with animals. And because this son is different than your others, I think you have to realize that there could be something there that's more than just not interested in it. This could be a wiring thing, and you have to respect how your kids are wired. Trying to force them into areas that they're not wired for typically doesn't end well. Now, as a dad, I'm all for helping my kids overcome things that they're not comfortable with, especially if it's something that they're going to encounter for the rest of their lives, no matter what. I don't know that this is one of those things. I mean, at least learning to be comfortable around dogs, even if it's uncomfortably comfortable, could be good, because you don't want someone who's so uncomfortable with animals that every time they see one, they just geek and run the other way. You don't want that. Establishing some kind of comfort there is good, but forcing him to try to have a relationship that he's not capable of creating, if he's not wired for that, just isn't going to happen. And what's going to end up happening is what has happened now. There will be drama, because you're trying to force a square peg in a round hole, and it just doesn't work like that. Now, that's easy for me to say as an outsider. Each one of my kids are wired completely differently, and as a dad, I have my frustrations in trying to make certain things happen, or trying to get them to get interested in this, or not understanding why this one thing is so difficult for them, and that's because I'm their dad. You can be very much too close to this situation and not able to see that Dylan might just be wired this way. You have already said that Dylan is vividly different than your other boys. You've already said some of the things that indicate that he is wired different, and you have to at least acknowledge that it's a possibility that he's not wired to be able to do what you're wanting him to do. It's possible. Here's the kicker. You had good intentions, so you're not a total asshole for doing this, and I think that's what we need to establish here, is that you had good intentions. It's not something that you were doing out of spite. You weren't doing this with malicious intent. You are coming from a good place. So let's refer to our new AskCon levels and see where you fit. Quick reminder, AskCon 1 is no way you should have done that. You're a terrible human being. AskCon 2 is definitely shouldn't have done that, but that doesn't make you a terrible person. AskCon 3 is you probably should have approached that differently. AskCon 4, you probably could have approached that differently. Maybe you're an asshole, maybe you're not. And I think we're at AskCon 3 here. because there was clearly a wiring difference with Dylan that either you were just too close to see or ignored and tried to force the square peg into the round hole. You probably should have approached that differently. Also, something that we need to point out here is that Dylan went and told his mom, who didn't know. And if you're going to be working on something like this, it really has to be with the blessing of your significant other, because this kind of thing might require some teamwork if you both feel strongly about doing something like this. The fact that you flew rogue on it, trying so hard to get Dylan to do this thing, and eventually he told his mom, makes you more of an asshole, because it's like you were doing it intentionally behind your spouse's back. This thing requires teamwork. You shouldn't have anything to hide here. So maybe don't do that again, and maybe just acknowledge that Dylan is wired differently, and acknowledge that that wiring difference is going to make some things much more difficult or impossible. This can be a really positive learning experience if you allow it to be, because now that you know this, you can apply that to everything moving forward. And you can more than make up for this thing that happened. If anything, you can turn it into a net positive for both of your lives by using this as a learning experience and treating the next situation completely differently.